My name is Neil Herschan and I'm delighted to be hosting this panel discussion where we're going to be talking about future-proofing facilities management strategies for 2030 and beyond. Central to today's session is JLA's newly released white paper, The Road to 2030. This is a strategic guide designed to help FM professionals navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. To shape this paper, JLA surveyed experienced FM leaders and subscribers of the Facilities Management Journal, and the result is a rich resource packed with insights, priorities and practical guidance that reflect the real-world concerns of the sector. You can download that white paper from the JLA website, which is www.jla.com/white paper. I'm going to hand over now to the panel to introduce themselves. Jonathan?
Hello, my name is Jonathan Ling. I'm the Legal and HR Director for JLA. I'm also the Sustainability Ambassador, and I'm responsible for spearheading sustainability in JLA and implementing our policy.
Helen?
I'm Helen Buchan. I'm the Head of Product at JLA. I'm responsible for sourcing products that help our customers meet their sustainability goals where possible, and also responsible for looking after our existing portfolio.
Mark.
Hi. Mark Whittaker. I suppose I wear three hats. My day job is the General Manager of Thomson FM. We're an FM consultancy. My second hat, I suppose, is the fact for the last 4 years I've been chair of the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, and for the last 6 years been a board director as well, and a volunteer for the Institute for probably over 15 years. And I suppose the third hat is this year we launched a new professional association, the Association for Professional Standards in Asset Surveying, which is a crucial part of the whole FM function, and we've launched a new professional association, and I'm a founding director of that this year.
Welcome, Mark. And then Robert.
Hi, I'm Robert Ackland. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at JLA. I'm responsible for all of our technology, but in particular, I'm responsible for our digital transformation and all the data that sits behind that.
So, Jonathan, what are some of the barriers to achieving sustainability goals and meeting reporting obligations?
Well, I suppose the first thing is the knowledge gap. You need to really understand this area quite well in order to start to achieve the targets that are being set and the reporting obligations. And it can be very complicated. You start talking about Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 emissions, Scope 3 emissions. And, you know, from our own personal perspective, it's been a very steep learning curve, but it's a curve that everyone has to get on very quickly now because regulation has been kind of slow to come up, but now there's quite a lot there, reporting, but also things like greenwashing, where you can't make green claims without having some evidence and some substance to it. Otherwise, you're opening yourselves up to liability, both from a regulator, but also from your consumers or your customers, from your investors as well. And it can be a huge reputational hit as well. There have been some quite high-profile cases in the past. There's been an increase in greenwashing claims in the last year by about 35%. So there is a lot to get your head around. So I'd say the biggest barrier is that knowledge piece. And you've got to get up to speed with what all these concepts mean, first of all. So that's probably the first one. And the second one is getting your head around your supply chain as well, because sustainability isn't just about yourself. It's not just about the things that you can control. So for JLA, what that means is we obviously have a great deal of vans running around the country. The things that we can control is the emissions associated with those vans. So diesel, petrol. If we can switch to electric, that would be massive for us in terms of reducing our emissions. And that's something that we've done with our company cars. So we've already reduced emissions by 11% as a result of electrifying our company car fleet. But that's one thing that we control. But behind that is our supply chain, which you can broadly call Scope 3 emissions. So all the emissions associated with our entire supply chain, if you wanted to go net zero, you would have to get a handle on how you manage that and how you influence your supply chain to get them to reduce their emissions, so that then has the knock-on impact on you as well. So probably the two biggest things is the knowledge gap and influencing your supply chain.
I think I can probably add to that as well. So from a supplier perspective, so a key part of my role is engaging with our suppliers and understanding their own supply chain as well. So some of the things we ask our suppliers when we ask them to demonstrate is, from your own buildings perspective, how sustainable are your own buildings? For example, do they have solar panels? In terms of the energy that they're using to create the products that we buy. We're really interested from that perspective. And then in terms of the products that we're looking to buy from our suppliers, how are those products manufactured? What does their own supply chain look like? Sometimes they're quite uncomfortable conversations, particularly when we started having them maybe 12, 18 months ago. Lots of suppliers hadn't even thought about this, and they didn't think that we were going to be asking those questions. I'm really pleased to say now that the strategic reviews that we've had so far this year, the suppliers now, that they have got the answers for us. They do know about their own emissions. They're reporting on their own scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. So that in turn really helps us then make choices when it comes to our product offering, sustainable product choices about our products that we're bringing into our portfolio.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the white paper, it talks about how the relationship between FMs and suppliers, so it talks about the relationship between FMs and suppliers and how only 1% of FMs are currently engaging with their suppliers on sustainability. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about how JLA as a supplier is then helping FM companies with meeting their regulations?
Yeah, and I think that 1%, I'm probably seeing that on a day-to-day basis. It's definitely, it's us, it's JLA, that when we are talking to our customers, it tends to be us that's bringing that to the fore. And I would wholeheartedly encourage all of our FM customers to get in touch and talk to us about this. We are really keen to work with our customers. We're really keen to see where can we make the changes, what products are going to help our FM customers. I think everybody thinks sustainability is about having a heat pump installed, an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump, but it's not just about that. It's about what are your existing assets, what does your existing estate look like, and what are the really small changes that you can make. So, we're not suggesting go from, completely gas and fossil fuel products overnight. Just what are the small little changes that you can make? So, for instance, if you've got a gas-fired water heater that's supplying your hot water, could you maybe look at, there is such a thing as an air source heat pump water heater, and we've been testing one of those for the last 12 months. So we've got stats around how much obviously how much fossil fuel that can save you, but also how much electricity it can save you versus just an electric water heater. So yeah, you don't have to make massive drastic changes. You can make small changes, and those changes can really then add up. If you've got an estate of quite a substantial amount of assets, those small changes will really start to add up.
If I can come in on that, actually, I think I'd agree with all of that. And I'd probably just add that one of the first things people should be doing is understanding what their estate looks like in the first place from an energy perspective. So one of the things that you can do is just do some energy monitoring to see what when you're actually drawing power and what that looks like. And you might be surprised. So, for example, you might not realise, but you might have boilers that are running during the night, and all you need to do is change that so that they're not on during that time, and that reduces the emissions. So the first thing to do really is to understand what your portfolio looks like, what your estate looks like in terms of an energy consumption perspective, and then make some decisions from there. And like Helen said, it will be the small things first that will make a difference that you could do, and you don't really realise it yet.
Yeah, and if I can just mention another example of that, I suppose from a Thomson FM consultancy perspective, really is the fact we work for a national theatre group, and it wasn't an expensive investment to get monitors in there that were looking, sensor technology in there that was looking at that energy usage. This theatre group had a really easy win of understanding through their monitoring that they were keeping their fridges open, ongoing during the night for soft drinks, when there was absolutely no point in them doing that because the theatre was closed and they weren't going to get people through the doors until the following evening. So just little tweaks like that made a really big, significant difference to them. And I think you're absolutely right. That's where organisations need to start looking, start monitoring in a really cost-effective way through sensor technology, and then looking at the data, analysing it, and just seeing where those spikes are. And small changes can have big impacts.
And I suppose from JLA's perspective, from the connected machines, that's where we can help as well.
Yeah, with the rollout of connected machines and actually putting data in the hands of our customers, we really help them sort of shift some of their behaviours and make those small changes. So it's one area where digitisation can really empower organisations. We've been providing a lot of data about energy use and energy intensity of laundries, and what it's allowed us to do is to proactively advise our customers on how they can reduce those with other products, but also just behavioural changes as well. The other area where we've really tried to help in this area, and again, this is freely available data to everybody, so you don't need to be a JLA customer to get this, is CO2 data. How carbon intensive is the national grid? There are websites that tell you that, and you can change your behaviours to actually use energy at the least carbon intensive times.
Thanks for that, Robert. Mark, it's estimated that 40% of facilities managers are likely to retire by 2026. So that's going to be a real significant shift in the workforce. And it's going to raise questions about how the industry is going to evolve. How can FMs upskill to lead in a data-driven world?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. From an IWFM perspective, they recently released their market intelligence report, and that talked a lot about skill shortages within the industry. Interestingly enough, I think it was around 29% of respondents stated that there was a skill shortage in sustainability, knowledge and understanding and good practice. If we're looking at the wider industry, yeah, that 40% figure, I'm hearing it across lots of different sectors. I was recently at a conference where NHS England were talking about their estates and facilities teams across England and the demographics of that, and they were quoting a figure of 41% of their workforce are now 55 and over, but only 4% are below the age of 25. So they've got a real problem. They've got a problem because people aren't necessarily coming through apprenticeships. There isn't the interest there sometimes, or colleges are cutting back on those particular courses and not offering them. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and there's competing industries as well that are doing a really good job or are competing for the same people as well. But going back to the question you're asking, we've got a problem. I don't think data is and technology is gonna solve it, but it's certainly going to help it. And I think we're going to need some fresh skill sets coming into the industry in the coming years as well. And that's going to happen at quite a rate of knots, I suspect.
You mentioned that data and technology isn't going to be it's not going to be the answer, but it can help with part of the problems. Robert, what's your sort of take on that?
I mean, I do completely agree. There's no data or technology, despite all the hype you might hear about AI, that's going to come and fix your air conditioning for you. They are cold, hard skills, but data can help you become much more effective in how you use the people you do have. So in terms of becoming more efficient, it can really help you out. So using data to monitor your assets that you have can inform you as to which assets actually need attention, rather than having to have sort of rigid and fixed service schedules, which are quite demanding. Also, one of our experiences, we use a lot of data and technology, and actually a little bit of AI does help us here in actually just scheduling our engineers out in the field and getting them places much more effectively. So we've seen a sort of 20% increase in engineer efficiency and effectiveness in terms of the number of jobs they're able to do, and actually, going back to our previous conversation, that's also helped us with emissions as well, because they're actually driving more efficiently. Their routing is better. So there's a lot that technology can do to help with the situation, but ultimately you still need the skills there.
I've got a question for you, Mark, that I'm hoping you can help me with. So one of the biggest challenges that we have as a business, particularly with our FM customers, and I'm so keen to try and help solve this problem, is we have a lot of customers that will come to us and they'll say, I've got an estate of maybe 1,000 assets, but it's quite frustrating and it's quite limiting in terms of the customer will say, but I can't tell you like where the assets are. I think I've got about 1,000 assets. I can't tell you what condition they're in. I can't tell you what age they are. And that it's frustrating and it's quite limiting for us in terms of, so compliance is a huge thing, not just for FM customers, but for all of our customers across all the sectors that we serve. But we can't help you. We can't give you what you need from a compliance perspective if we don't know what asset we're going to service, or we don't know where the asset is. We don't know what condition the asset's in. So one of the things I'm really keen to try and I don't think there's a silver bullet here, but one of the things I'm trying to try and help and understand and work through is, even if we talk about the brilliant basics, so it kind of blows my mind that we have customers that don't have a clue where their assets are and what kind of a condition those assets are in. So how can I help? How can I help you guys fix that?
Yeah, it's a good question. My first response is welcome to my world. So as a consultancy, Thomson FM, we do a lot of asset surveying. We do a lot of analysis of data, transposing that data into CAFM systems, computer-aided facilities management software systems, to then drive their PPM regimes, their statutory compliance. Yeah. But coming back to the question as to how we do it, it's a problem, and I've called it kind of like the lack of quality of asset data across the board is almost like epidemic proportions within our industry. And the reason I say that is that if you have a look at the National Audit Office and other kind of scrutiny that's been done on public sector contracts, a lot of the time they will talk about different things that aren't working in government contracts, which estates and FM is part of it. Some of the things they talk about is, yes, sometimes it could be poor management of contracts, but a lot of the time it's about poor data, missing data. And you talk to FM co's and they'll like yourselves, will have that conversation where they say, well, we mobilised a contract, we started it, and then suddenly the client said, oh yeah, sorry, we didn't realise you've got there's these properties as well that you need to be responsible for. And the starting point is that you need that asset information to be able to evidence you're going to be statutory compliant, and also have got a regime in place that can maintain them. I've done a lot of work over the last 12 months with SFG 20 and BISA, and they've been publicising results that they've got from their own research, and part of that was from their surveys they've done, only 9% of respondents could say that their asset registers were up to date.
Wow.
31% of their respondents said their asset registers were contained on a spreadsheet, and 34% admitted that they'd actually don't manage them and keep them up to date. So an asset register may be accurate at a point of time, but if they haven't got the protocols in place for updating it when new assets are added or removed, then it quickly becomes out of date. So it's absolutely crucial for the industry.
And do you think that's recognised by the FM co's themselves?
I think yes. I think sometimes it can be done whereby on contracts costs are cut at a mobilisation stage, so they're not doing the correct asset collection surveys at that stage, and then some of those contracts can really get off on the wrong foot because of that missing information. So, and it is, I think it's more increasingly now being known, and I think the Building Safety Act is helping with that, so that that is putting their requirement on to kind of building owners at this moment in time in residential, but it will come its way into commercial properties and other properties as well. Of saying, okay, well, there's your starting points are to have a fully accurate asset register. and then to develop a digital PPM, pre-planned preventative maintenance strategy that's aligned to that. And is that going to be aligned to an industry standard like SFG 20? More and more people are getting that understanding as to what their requirements are. But it's really, it's an investment. And sometimes organisations don't want to spend the money on getting their asset data right up to date because there's no obvious return or value on that in terms of it. But it's a necessity that needs to be done.
Liability.
Other than the liability if things are going wrong
Yeah.
and the HSE come knocking on the door.
Yeah.
It is so important, but there's a lack of knowledge. There's an element of complacency, I would say, within the industry, and it needs to change, and it needs to change fundamentally. And that's one of the reasons when I mentioned before in the introduction about kind of the association that we formed this year, the APSAS, Association for Professional Standards in Asset Surveying. A key part of that is to get professionals that are doing good quality asset surveying, collecting details of these assets that then can drive compliance and PPM regimes, but addressing a skill shortage there because we need young people coming into that profession and learning and understanding as a career pathway. But, when we talk about the FM engine as such, one of those crucial cogs of that is having that good asset data and the collection of that and the periodic updating of that and condition data.
Yeah.
So it's fundamental, really.
And I think going back to the whole brilliant basics thing, I mean, we can definitely help because from a new asset perspective, our assets, they're connected, they go onto onto our My JLA platform, and then you can see all that information and you can see all your compliance information. I think the challenge is definitely the existing assets that are out there on customers' estates. So yeah, I think watch this space for what we do.
Yeah, and it kind of uniformity of how that asset information is collected as well. And you're right. And there's some great examples, and that's what we need to do as an industry. We need to learn what the good things are being done there. A couple of years ago, I worked with a national retailer, and they had all that information. They work with their FM provider, and it's there, at a click. They can tell whatever store around the country where they are in compliance. And if there is a problem, if there is a red, for example, they know immediately what's happening. They can drill down on that and they can get the understanding of it and the visibility of it and they kind of the reassurance that all the data is accurate and things are in place.
Stress as well.
Absolutely.
That's
they're in control, and that's what. But also, area managers, contract managers, they're in control of that as well because they have the visibility to do that, and that's what we need to be using systems to be able to do it, but underpinned by really good asset data.
I think that also the power of using those systems, particularly in very large distributed organisations, is you can make compliance very obvious to, say, for example, a branch manager. You can offer them comparators and say, actually, if you do have that data, there is a power in being able to manage your organisation much more effectively and actually drive the right behaviours as well. I mean, you mentioned complacency. It's much harder to be complacent when you see you're in the bottom 25% of all stores, for example.
Yeah.
100%.
It's easy to be in control as well. I think if you think about things like the pandemic, if you think about the war in Russia and the energy crisis, I think if you're in control of your estate and your assets, actually being in control when things do go a little bit crazy, actually you're controlling what you can control.
Well, absolutely. And I talked about it being a cog in the kind of the FM engine as such, but it drives so many areas. So it's not just in terms of statutory compliance side of things either. Good data is very much fundamental to a good asset management strategy, life cycle strategy. We do a lot of work with organisations that want to develop a robust strategy in that area so that they're not hit by expensive repairs potentially in the future that they didn't foresee, but also can monitor the condition of those assets as well and understand how they're performing, and then having plans in place and budgets in place to actually start predicting exactly what they're going to need to replace in the future. So again, it's known that they're in control of that. They understand what's going to happen, and they can have those conversations with the relevant stakeholders, to really kind of make them aware of what forecasting is being done and what needs to be replaced in the future.
it's almost like modelling through a variety of scenarios, you know, for if and when the world goes crazy again. Actually, you can, having that data, you can probably confidently say, well, I think this is the impact it's going to have, and these are the things that we potentially need to change, or, you know, to look at changing, so that if the world does go crazy again, it's not going to impact us in a way that it's probably impacted us in the past.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, to talk about like young people coming in and new ideas, like given where we are at the moment, we're in a bit of a period of flux that manufacturers don't really want to pin the hat on one thing. So if I talk about air source heat pumps in particular, like nobody at the minute seems to be going, right, this is the answer and this is the way forward. So I think we need the younger generations to come in and come up with what the answers might be, because I think currently nobody has the answer. The government doesn't have the answer. They're not prepared to legislate. There's so many things that are up in the air at the minute. So like we're crying out for new ideas, you know, for people to innovate and try and help us find a solution and to move us forward, because it feels like we're kind of stagnating at the moment, because the cost of gas is so cheap versus the cost of electricity. So businesses are kind of going, well, I'm not prepared to hang my hat on that product solution, because actually I need the levies to shift from gas onto electricity to bring the cost of electricity down. So it just feels like we're in a bit of a period of flux at the moment. Are you seeing that, Mark?
Yeah, and I think, just going to your point, and it's what we were discussing before about AI, and data intelligence has been around for a while. We've now got a badge to put on it as artificial intelligence, but BMS systems, of course, have been around a while. How we've used those and is open to debate at times as well, and maybe not the most efficient way of doing things. But I think there is a need for, and there will happen, that there will be new skill sets that will drive the industry forward, that will be able to analyse a lot of the data that's coming through. So although the generation of that data is going to expand a lot, and although AI is going to help in terms of some of the interpretation of that, it's really the human interaction of then deciding, okay, well, given this, what it's telling us, how is that going to then drive our FM strategies going forward, our planned preventative maintenance strategy, for example, how we reduce the level of breakdowns, for example, our life cycle, which I've mentioned before, really. So I think the skill sets are going to change quite rapidly. I think I've always been a keen advocate of new talent coming into the industry with fresh ideas, and I think we need that, that are going to just drive certain things forward and actually start questioning the norm, and to say, well, why are we doing that? Why can't we do this more kind of using more technology rather than necessarily having a person there, and using technology in a much more effective way than we have before, really.
I think this comes back to a few of the themes, though. I mean, it sounds like the FM industry is a very data-rich industry, but it's not a data-led industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there is actually a bit of a journey that needs to go on, and part of that starts with a bit of thought leadership, exactly what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You know, having a bit of a vision around what you can do with that data. Yeah. But the journey you need to go on is quite long, and actually getting that data in order, working out what you need, what is valuable is a really key part of going on that journey. And even before you put something like AI in place, actually AI relies on good data. So you have to go on that data journey first. And so I think one of the core key skills that needs to come in, and the first step of that journey is going to be bringing in people who are data savvy and know what they can do. So yeah, I do agree with your points.
Yeah.
Mark, so you talked about skills gaps, but just thinking then about knowledge gaps, only 26% of FMs said that they were familiar with the Building Safety Act. So from your viewpoint, what do you think the biggest compliance blind spot is for FMs today?
I think it's what we talked about just previously, really, is that asset register and the need to get good fundamental data there of what an organisation has, what assets are in there which need to be maintained. And yeah, going to the Building Safety Act, I was invited to do a webinar earlier this year where Dame Judith Hackett had done an interview with SFG 20, and she'd given some of her kind of frustrations and some positives, to be fair, about the adoption of the Building Safety Act, but the work that needed to be done, and the fact that there's a lot of training and understanding that still needs to come forward, because I think a lot of FMs still think that it doesn't apply to them and never will. But we're down that track. These things will become industry practice, and whether it be accurate digital asset registers, or whether it be PPM regimes that are driven through a CAFM system that can show compliance, like, instantly. Those are kind of things that will develop. But there is a skills issue and a training issue. As I mentioned, the IWFM do a market intelligence report, and a key part of that was saying about that there is about 29% of people that need to be better trained in sustainability, for example, energy management. But also there's a need as well in terms of compliance and understanding responsibilities for compliance. IWFM have been one of the front runners in terms of providing kind of some of that training courses that are specific, geared towards need on what they're being told by the marketplace to say, listen, this is where there's a lack of understanding. And more and more organisations are coming to the Institute to say, right, we need you to deliver some training for us, because we need to understand what the implications of the Building Safety Act are, or we need to understand what our obligations are for statutory compliance. What is it that we need to do? And so there's a lot of different things, but there's other professional associations out there doing the same. But it's just educating, training people to understand this is a fundamental part of your role that you need to be up to speed with.
And do you think there's going to need to be a big case with a big liability attached to it in order to really drive and embed that kind of awareness? Or do you think it's going to happen kind of incrementally, like you said?
Yeah, you kind of hope that it doesn't take another Grenfell to get the things moving. And the fact that I think the only way that it could, it does potentially need to be kind of brought forward a bit more is probably through government legislation, and getting clear understanding of what's required. So yeah, in answer, I really hope it doesn't take another monumental kind of disaster to highlight some of the bad practice or shortcuts or things that aren't being done. But I still maintain that we've got to get the basics right within the industry, and the basics are to get good data and to then be able to evidence compliance. That has to be the starting point. Yeah. From a client perspective, if they're dealing with FM codes, that's what they want their FM code to be delivering for them. That's where they will lose sleep at night, of understanding, is my property estate compliant? Is everything done as it should be done? There's no gaps in there. And only when that's been done can they then start being more strategic in some of the other areas. But it's getting those fundamentals right, I think, is still really, really important.
From some of the customers that I've spoken to, so if we go back to the Building Safety Act, the gap that there always seems to be, so the government will issue the legislation, but actually one of the things that customers struggle with is then what does that mean for them? Yeah. So which parts of the legislation apply to them? And sometimes it's even just understanding the language that's used by government, when they're stipulating, this needs to happen. Sometimes the language that they use is not easy for people to understand.
No, and I think, but it's that we're here in the digital age now, and there's so much access to information, and whether that be, watching a webinar. Yeah. IWFM have done several webinars on the implications of the Building Safety Act. SFG 20 and BESA have done exactly the same. Other professional associations have also done that, where they've issued the kind of good practice guide and guidance, but also have done kind of training webinars to say, listen, this is what's relevant to you. And certainly what IWFM's tried to do with the training in response to the Building Safety Act was that we got industry experts to really write a training course that is specific to facilities management, and to say, okay, get it. It's quite a daunting. You're not expected to read all of it and understand all of it. Yeah. But this is what you need to know what's relevant to you. And even just on a simplistic level, SFG 20 earlier this year, they just produced a checklist document to say, right, this is what you need to understand. Like I mentioned before, the asset register was number one, yep. PPM regime was number two, a fully kind of functional CAFM system that's recording all this compliance data, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, they're there. The information's there, but I think it's people just need to go out there and access it and get up to speed.
So, Mark, there's a lot of information out there. What are some of the resources that you would signpost people to?
I suppose the main one I would probably say from an IWFM perspective is the fact that IWFM very much supported the establishment of the Scope 3 emissions framework. And that's really, really useful information for any facilities management professional that can access. And it will talk about kind of the measurement of the supply chain and how they go about kind of building that. It also talks about putting forward business case for investment, not just from a financial perspective, but also from a sustainability perspective as well. So that's a really, really good, useful starting point in terms of that framework. There is some really good practice guides, research and insight papers, but also I'd probably signpost as well is that every year IWFM publishes its sustainability report as well. And that talks a lot about kind of the growing trend and strong investment in decarbonisation, and also the advocacy there that FM should be leading those conversations because it's very much under their control. But what they need to do is to get the relevant skill sets and knowledge to be able to put forward those compelling business cases within their organisations that can show those returns on investment, but have an impact in areas of hitting those net zero targets. And as I say, implementing some of these decarbonisation projects, retrofitting projects for equipment as well. All these different things that they can get involved in. But there's information out there that is really kind of simplified to use. It's not overly complex, but will get them up to speed and to give them the confidence to have those conversations and to lead those within organisations.
And so for all of those resources, you can find them on the IWFM website?
Yeah, the website has, for members, you've got the login there that they can access those kind of good practice guides and other supporting documents as well, and research and insight papers, and the reports that I've mentioned as well. Yeah, it's all on there.
Brilliant. Well, I'm conscious of time, so we'll start to wrap things up. But before we do, I think it'd be quite helpful just to go round the room and give everyone a chance to, sign off. What's your final thought or key takeaway from today's chat?
I suppose from my perspective, sustainability is an obligation, but it's also our responsibility now. I think for somebody who's coming at it fresh or starting to think about it, start off with understanding your world from a sustainability perspective. Make sure you understand your scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. As we've already talked about, there's a lot of helpful resource out there to help you do this, or you can get consultants to help you. There's lots and lots of resource out there. So that's what I would do. And then in terms of building up what your sustainability policy or vision might be, once you've got that information, you can start to look at how you can reduce your emissions. But the key thing is obviously to do something in a credible way. Gone are the days when you can make any kind of statement about how green your enterprise is, because that doesn't wash anymore, literally. So if you're going to do that, it's got to be credible.
Helen?
My key takeaway would be it's brilliant basics. So focus on doing the basics as brilliantly as you can do. So start with, basic data points and build from there.
Mark?
I'm going to follow on from Helen's basics, I suppose. From my perspective, given we've been talking about the Building Safety Act, is to embed the good practice that's trying to introduce. And that's very much talks about getting accurate and up-to-date asset registers, having that underpinned by a really robust planned preventative maintenance regime that then goes into a CAFM system and then can show statutory compliance. So I suppose it's getting those basics right is really, really important. And that is an industry-wide need to do. And it's that golden thread of getting that data and then using it in how FM services are delivered. But also, I suppose, the other thing just quickly to mention is the fact that we've stressed a lot. There's help out there that people just need to go out there and access it. And there are experts out there. We do a lot of work at Thomson FM in terms of doing asset surveying, getting that data then analysed and then getting that within their CAFM systems and a new PPM regime and a robust regime in place. So there's help out there that can be done for that. And also there's lots of information out there, like I've mentioned before, whether it be through IWFM or other professional associations, through good practice guides, through webinars, through research and insight, and through reports that can just help get that knowledge base increased, and for people not to be daunted, but to really understand what their obligations are, and then to find out how they can then get to where they need to be.
Brilliant. Robert?
Sure. So data is going to be hugely important in the facilities industry for sort of driving future growth, future efficiencies. And there's already a lot of data available. I think one of the big problems that everyone is going to face is how to work with that data, how to see the wood from the trees and solve the real problems that are being faced. My advice would be step back for a moment, really ask some questions before you jump in and analyse that data. Work out what you want to solve before you get more data. And that will really help you make the problem a little bit smaller and easier to deal with, and you'll start to drive some really good outcomes, making the best use of those scarce and becoming scarcer resources, and also improving things like compliance and managing things like Scope 3. So data's going to be powerful, but take it in small chunks.
Brilliant. We'll leave it there for today. We've covered a lot of ground. I think, as Mark, you've said, there's lots of resources, tools, support out there. FMs, they're not alone. Mm-hmm. So I think on the screen somewhere we're going to have some resources that will show you everything that's available. So like we talked at the start, we've got the JLA white paper, The Road to 2030. There's also the JLA Knowledge Hub that's got lots of useful blogs and articles on there, and all of the resources from the IWFM you can access too. It leaves me now then just to say thank you to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to you for joining us wherever you are. And yeah, we'll see you soon.